Добрий день.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center, Ukrinform. My name is Olga Atamanova, and we continue our work. It's been 300 days of heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people against Russian invasion, and now we will be talking about the situation in our Air Force. Joining us online is Yuriy Ignat, the spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Yuriy. Good afternoon. Mr. Yuriy, let's start with yesterday's attack. Unfortunately, we see that the Russians don't cease bombarding our country. Can you please give us a few comments on the yesterday's events? Well, yesterday was the St. Nicholas Day. The Russians greeted us with one of the biggest Shahid shellings, I mean, in terms of the quantity. There were 35 strike drones launched against Ukraine. I prepared minor statistics for you. So they never launched the same number of Shahids before. We published the details on all the Shahid attacks, so probably they have another shipment. Well, it's already known that they do have another shipment, 250 Shahids they did receive from Iran. And after that long pause, well, conditionally or relatively long term, because they haven't been using them within a couple of weeks, since 7th of December, we have 67 UAVs of this type shut down. It's certain percentage, obviously not all of them. Unfortunately, during yesterday's attack, 5 UAVs hit their targets, including the residential areas. Usually they use the Shahids from other locations. Previously it was the occupied Ukrainian Crimea and Kherson region. Now they shifted their launch sites to Krasnodar County, is the eastern shore of the Sea of Azov. This is where the Shahids are launched against Ukraine now. We managed to down certain fraction of them as they are launched in Mykolaiv region, Kherson region. Further on, some of the drones do penetrate our airspace. We understand that the enemy uses all the details, all the intelligence they have, the land intelligence, reconnaissance, airspace intelligence, agent intelligence, so that there are some routes where they see some weak links in Ukrainian air defense. Obviously, we cannot cover all the territory of Ukraine with our air defense, and this is where they penetrate our airspace, but the Air Command East also destroys some part of the drones, and in the area of responsibility of Air Command Center, a fraction of them were destroyed as well. So who actually shuts down these loitering UAVs are the anti-aircraft forces, anti-rocket forces, who protects all of us. Also, the units of aviation get engaged, the interceptors and the fighter jets who are launched to intercept those drones. It's not so easy to use the aircraft, the interceptor aircraft, against this type of loitering UAVs, but there are also mobile fire teams whose effectiveness gradually grows, and teamwork with the land forces, the air defense forces and the land forces of Ukraine. They worked good yesterday in terms of downing those UAVs yesterday. So again, after that pause, 67 UAVs were downed after that pause. So we can assume that they were all coming from the new shipment. So everybody counts it for themselves and makes their own conclusions. So I don't exclude that probably the shipments will continue, because we understand that it's only the sea, this inland sea, that divides those two countries, so they can deliver them by air and even those shipments which were procured or ordered earlier. You said that the Russians received another shipment of 250 drones, and now we're witnessing the results of this shipment. Generally, how would this reinforcement of theirs complicate the work of our air defense forces? And how will it change the situation in the air? It's not that it complicates something, but we see for the first time the application of Shahed 136, and it's the first time that we witness the application of Shahed 131. It's a smaller version. Even no matter that they mark it as Hiran 1 or 2, we understand that those are Iranian drones, and what's actually happening is within November and December, we witnessed the application of 127 Shaheds and 300 cruise missiles. So it's continuation of what started happening from the 13th of October, when they launched it from Kupiansk, and then they started shooting them gradually, launching them gradually from different locations, studying the reaction of our air defense forces, or how will we down them, with what means. And they mostly use them during nighttime, because in the night there is no normal visibility to destroy them with the large caliber machine guns, for example, which are mostly used against the UAVs. So this is why they start launching them after 23:30, when the day is starting by Moscow time, and in fact all the way until 5 in the morning, those UAVs are being downed by the defense forces of Ukraine. Mr. Yuriy, just for our understanding, how long will it take for the drone to achieve the capital from the new launch site that you mentioned, in average? Again, as I mentioned, if they launch, for example, 23 and up to 5, the air raid alert will be on, not because it goes along the straight trajectory, but the enemy also takes into account the location of our air defense forces. And again, I remind our citizens not to publish either photos or videos which disclose the locations of our air defense force units. And this is why they find the ways around our positions, being guided by GPS, which are embedded in those drones. And they are tied to different satellite systems, and this is how they find ways around our positions, or they can go in circles around the air defense force positions, and that will obviously increase the time of arrival with the account of their speed, like 150 kilometers per hour. So this is their flight tasks. This is what we're facing, but we already developed certain measures that our defense forces use to destroy as much as possible drones as possible. So we have both visual observation posts and the automatic systems which react to the sound, and radars, electronic intelligence forces which work in acquisition of those targets, and fire means that destroy them on a pretty good scale. Well, talking about the missile carriers, how did their number change in the borders with Belarus and in the Black Sea? Well, there are different missile carriers. We have to understand that in the Black Sea, those are the vessels, and we see that Operational Command South keeps this promulgating the details on the location of the Russian vessels, which may stay in either one or other base or be on the combat duty. So those ships, they usually use the cruise missiles caliber, and they have a sufficient number of those cruise missiles, but they don't launch it as much as they use X-55 or X-101, and out of the total launch of, say, 100 rockets or 90 missiles being launched, only 10% of them, like 10 missiles, belong to this caliber category, which says that they are not quite ready to launch a lot of them. Maybe they have some issues with manufacturing this type of missiles. Maybe the manufacturing is not as powerful as the occupiers would like it to be. So we see less caliber missiles. And talking about the land-based missiles, as you mentioned in Belarus, for example, so the MiG-31K interceptors relocated to the Belarusian Air Force bases, airfields, and they launched those Iskander-1K missiles, and they pose certain threat to us. And if any aircraft of that type gets in the air, takes off, we already get the air raid alert signal. So their strategic aviation, which was based on the Engels airfield, after certain circumstances they had to relocate their aircraft to different airfields. Well, I mean the Cotton, the explosions, nobody knows what happened there, but there is damaged material, damaged aircraft over there. That's why the occupational forces of Russian Federation decided to relocate the air material and to disseminate it across a number of airfields, because the same explosions, same types of explosions happened in the airfield of Ryazan, where two Tupolev 22 bombers were based. So that's pretty much it, dear colleagues. Your questions, please. Good afternoon, Elena Sivko, Ukrinform. Mr. Yuriy, our military command warned of the growing threat of invasion from Belarus. Could you please comment on the number of aircraft in the military airfields in Belarus? Do we observe any inflow of ammunition, of material, and so forth? I don't have these details with me, but the only thing I can say that they didn't go anywhere from the airfields of Belarus. They're always in the airspace of Belarus. There is an AVAX aircraft which tracks all the air targets in Ukraine, and that aircraft worked before, from the very beginning of the conflict. I mean, from the beginning of the invasion, from the 24th of February. They work in Belarus and in the south of Belarus, and comparing to Illusion 22 or Illusion 32 aircraft, it's one aspect. And MiG-31, the tactical aviation of the Russian Federation, is constantly located in the airfields of Belarus. It's about 5 to 6 main airfields used by Russia in Belarus to pose threat from that direction. Generally, they use around 40 airfields to launch attacks against Ukraine, to locate the tactical aviation, not only tactical aviation, but also the transport aircraft, the helicopters, interceptors, attack aircraft, and so on. Now we see that their aviation activity of their aviation in the front lines became more vivid, but our pilots also inflict strikes on them, 10 to 15 airstrikes in total per day by our interceptors, but by our attack aircrafts, who destroy the air defense material of the enemy. And also our land forces aviation strikes the enemy in a quite an efficient manner. About the changes of structure of their aviation group, well, depending on their tasks, they relocate the material to Belarus airfields or back to Russia. In the same way it was happening with MiG-31K. 3 aircraft just moved to Russia, spent there a week or two maybe for scheduled maintenance, and then they came back to Belarus. Aviation is quite a mobile type of material, which may be easily relocated, and there is no problem with that. Another question, please. Доброго дня. Андрій Святина, Ukrinform. Could you please comment the social network TikTok is filled with streams of the representatives of the Ukrainian armed forces who show the numbers of their military units, names of their commanders, and other critical information. Is it a type of some work of the Central Intelligence Department of Russian Federation? Well, obviously the media hygiene should be in everyone's head, as I mentioned. Well, as I already said, we don't have to disclose the relocation of our troops, anything that any critical information in a country which is in war, that they say that our air defense forces work very efficiently. Thank you, your air defense gods, and so on and so forth. Well, yeah, we have to sort out any separate case. We have to work with it on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, there is a large number of psychological warfare, large number of psychological operations going on in the social media. So their information forces are created or were created very long ago. A lot of money were spent on it. And yes, they work, unfortunately, in an efficient manner, and they do their job quite efficiently. But among our forces, yes, there are useful people who play for the benefit of the enemy, who can analyze the information, which becomes popular, and we understand that all of it will be seen and will be analyzed by those people that I mentioned, their analytical departments, and it will all be used against Ukraine. So in that case, it's a question to certain controlling bodies in the armed forces. There is no censure, but nobody canceled military censure, because any information may result in death of whole units or even civilian population. So we have to keep calling our servicemen of all ranks. We have to educate them with media hygiene. Mr. Yuriy, thank you very much for joining us. Dear colleagues, I'm reminding you, joining us was Yuriy Ignat, the spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Our next briefing is at 14:30. Joining us online will be Pavlo Grod, the president of World Ukrainian Congress, and we will be talking about the assistance to the Ukrainians by this Congress. So bear with us, and glory to Ukraine.